guys, what is going on? It is Brooke, or the Undead DM, back at it again for the final episode of the Pugilist class review. And today we're going to be covering the final subclass for the Pugilist known as the Sweet Science. Now, if you guys haven't seen the Pugilist video covering the base class and my general thoughts and ideas towards it, I would recommend going to check that out before continuing with this video. Afterwards, feel free to go and check out the other subclass videos for my general thoughts on them, and make sure that this is a class that you'd want to buy and possibly play in your games. So with that, let's get started. So the Sweet Science is a bit interesting. It's kind of like the champion fighter, at least to me. It feels like the natural progression of the pugilist, but it, much like the champion fighter, just doesn't have enough there to really benefit or to really work as a subclass. So, to start, we get the Bare Knuckle Boxer, where you score a critical hit on 19 to 20 with your unarmed strikes. Okay. Cross Counter, also at 3rd level. When you take damage from a melee weapon attack, you can use your reaction and 2 Moxie points to reduce the damage by a d10 plus your strength plus your pugilist level. And if you reduce it to 0, you can make an unarmed strike or pugilist weapon attack against the creature as part of the reaction. Okay. Alright. At 6th level, you get 1, 2, 3 floor, where when you use your bonus action to use the old 1, 2, which is a Moxie feature that you can use similar to Monk's, what was it called? It's blanking out on me. Flurry of Blows. There we go. Apologies. So, when you use the old 1-2 and hit the same creature with both attacks, you can expend a Moxie point to make an additional unarmed strike against them. And if you hit, they are knocked prone, and they take damage as normal for your unarmed strike. At 11th level, you get Float Like a Butterfly and Sting Like a Bee, where at 11th level, when you reduce damage from an attack to 0 and successfully hit a creature using your cross counter, you regain a Moxie point. And then finally, at 17th level, you get Knockout. When you hit a creature with an unarmed strike or a pugilist weapon, you can expend 1 or more Moxie points to try to knock the opponent out instead of dealing damage. Roll 3d12, and you add an additional 2d12 for every Moxie point spent past the first Moxie point, and you add your pugilist level to the result. If the total is equal to or greater than the creature's remaining hit points, it is reduced to 0. Okay, let's go over this for a second. Crit fishing, which is the term used when a build or a character design is solely based on getting the chance to crit higher and dealing more damage with a critical hit, is not a good build. I will link the video by Pack Tactics explaining it a bit better than I can in this video. But essentially, crit fishing doesn't actually increase your damage all that much. Like I said previously in another episode, critting basically only increases your damage by less than 1 point of damage per round. Sometimes even less. And the higher your crit chance is, you're eventually going to get maybe a single point of damage difference, maybe 2 if you get really high up there. But other than that, this being your first 3rd level feature, you just get 19 to 20 for crits, you're still not getting a full point of damage out of that. You're not. Cross counter. With cross counter, it is deflect missiles, but worse. Because if we go over to deflect missiles here, let's just open up the monks thing right here, if it will load. Fantastic. So if we go to monk, and then we go to their deflect missiles feature, we will see that you just do it. You can use your reaction, and then if you reduce it to 0, you spend a key point. With this, it's not even an option. It is required that you do it. So while Monk over here just says for deflect missiles at 3rd level, which as opposed to cross counter, which they gain at the same level, monks, they just use their reaction and they reduce it by a d10 plus dexterity plus monk. And if they reduce it to 0, they spend a key point and they could throw it back at somebody, which in the new UA playtest is actually a lot better. But here, how it works is that you have to take damage from a melee attack, and you have to use your reaction and spend 2 points, as opposed to just using your reaction, and then if you reduce it to 0, you can spend 2 points. This is just strictly worse than deflect missiles, because it only works on melee attacks. It still uses your reaction. You spend twice the number of points, and the number of points is required in order to activate the ability. And you get the same level of reduction that the monk gets. So you're essentially spending double the resources that are now required, and the only thing you get out of it is an additional unarmed strike, which, granted, is not a bad feature. It's not basically a ribbon feature where it does nothing, but this might as well do nothing, because the amount of times at higher levels that you are actually going to be able to pull this off is very, very minimal. Like, when you get this, the most, if you're assuming a +3 strength modifier to start with point by, the most you're going to reduce this damage by is like 11, because the average of a d10 is like 5 to 6, 5.5. The average roll of a d10 is 5.5, so with a +3 strength, and then 3rd level for Pugilist, you're at most getting an 11-point reduction on average. So if it does any more than that, there's no point in using this ability. But also, at 3rd level, you're still only getting, I think, like 3 Moxie points at most. Yeah, at 3rd level, you're only getting 2 Moxie points, meaning to even use your subclass feature that you gain, you have to spend all of your Moxie points, which is also tied to your defensive ability in Brace Up and your Stick and Move, as well as your additional damage of your old one too. You just can't do anything. It's not good. And 1, 2, 3 floor doesn't really help it all that much, because by the time you hit 6th level, there are so many stipulations here that you have to follow, which it's a lot of wording, but basically it's just whenever you use your old 1-2, and you hit the same creature with both attacks. So, issue here is that you have to hit the same creature. It doesn't say target, it says hit, meaning if you miss one, you can't use this ability. If this was target the same creature, which you should be doing anyway to Focus Fire, because Focus Fire is strictly better than AoE in terms of damage output, then this ability, you're already having to spend your bonus action. You're already having to spend a Moxie point. And you have to Focus Fire, which you should be doing. But then you can spend an additional point to make a single unarmed strike against them. And if you hit them, they are knocked prone. There's no save. That portion's fine. But why do you have to spend an additional Moxie point to do this? You're already spending a Moxie point to do 2 additional punches with the old 1-2. So why do I have to spend an additional point to get half the benefit, but then I get to knock them prone? Yeah, they still take the damage as normal for that unarmed strike, but the fact that they have to spend an additional Moxie point, which at this point is like 3 or 4, you're spending half of your Moxie points just to knock a creature prone and deal an additional attack, which also at this level is a D6 or a D8. So you're not really achieving much. If this was you spend a Moxie point and you just knock a creature, like, I don't know, if you just knock them prone without having to make an additional attack. Like the old 1-2-3 floor just states that when you use your old 1-2 and you target the same creature with both attacks, you can choose to knock them prone. Personally, it's still not that good to me. I wouldn't want to just have to hit the same person, because I know a lot of people don't. I like to hit the same person multiple times until they're down. That's just me, though. I know a lot of people like to spread out their damage. And sometimes you don't have this option. There are some times when you're facing a lot of goons, and you kill one of them, and now that's your one, and you have to make it a second attack against another creature, but you can't prone that creature, because you didn't make both attacks against them. Which sucks. If this was just, when you use your old 1-2, you can spend a Moxie point to perform 2 more attacks, and knock one creature you targeted with one of your attacks prone. This would be a little bit better, so this way you would go, I use my old 1-2, I turn it into 1-2-3 floor, I prone the first guy I hit with my first punch, and then my 3 other punches are now at advantage because I'm within melee of him. So then you just start a beat down on him. That's significantly better than having to spend a Moxie point and having to target the same creature. Granted, you're going to target the same creature anyway, but limiting it to hitting the same creature, even in situations where you can't hit the creature more than once because they're going down, or the person you were targeting just has some kind of like contingency to vanish or whatever have you, they just don't, you can't hit them again, then this is basically a useless feature. At 11th level, this is very important to be a damage ability. If your subclass is going to have a feature at 11th level, it needs to increase the damage, because fighters at this level get an additional attack. I mean, they can get an additional 6 points of damage using a two-handed weapon. So you're already falling behind. So if this doesn't increase damage, which we know it doesn't, then it's just not that good. Sure, reducing a creature to 0, or when you reduce damage to 0 using cross counter, you regain a Moxie point. That doesn't help you. It doesn't help. It doesn't hurt, but it doesn't help either, because you're already having to spend 2 Moxie points to even use cross counter. And it's not even when you use it, it's when you reduce the damage to 0. And once again, cross counter is melee only. It still requires your reaction and double the Moxie points for the same damage reduction. If this refunded like 3 Moxie points, 4 Moxie points, and the attack that you get to do with cross counter now adds your Pugilist level to the damage of the attack, which at this point, yeah, it's a plus 11, so you're going to be dealing a little bit less damage than fighters at a similar level. It's fine. Like, just give them something else. And finally, knockout. Okay, it's a worse sleep spell. It's strictly a worse sleep spell. Yeah, you get less dice, and you get a better scaling because it has a higher die, and you get more die when you scale it as opposed to the sleep spell. But the fact that you have to spend a Moxie point, which at 17th level, you only have 9 of, meaning that at maximum, because it starts at 3d12 and it increases by 2d12 each time, that means if we expend 1 point to use it in the first place, that's 3d12, and then we get 2d12 per, that's 8 additional points. So that's 19d12. So if the average of a d12 is 6.5, that's an average of 123 damage that you could deal with knockout. Which, for the same level that they can cast Conjure Animals and get 32 animals on the board and have more HP and could deal more damage and be more useful than 123 points of damage, in a single punch for all of your Moxie points, for even the chance to reduce it to 0, not even kill outright. And that's my main thing here. Oh, I also forgot to add the Pugilist level, so an additional 17, that's 140. So for an average of 140 points HP that you could deal to a creature without killing it, it has to be greater than or equal to the remaining hit points. At that point, why not just hit them? Sure, you're not going to be dealing the insane amounts of quote-unquote damage here because you're not really damaging them, you're reducing their HP by an amount equal to the amount that you rolled, similar to sleep. But at that point, why not just hit them? Sure, take one creature out of the fight, but now you're out of pretty much all your Moxie points, and you can't use any of your features anymore because you're all out. Unless you somehow have something that allows you to use cross counter, and then you get the effects of float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, and then you get 1 Moxie point back. Awesome. But you're still losing a lot of damage. Overall, I think Knockout should just insta-kill. It should be, they have to make a save, and if they fail, they get reduced to 0 hit points, or you spend a Moxie point, you deal this much damage, and if it reduces them to a threshold, then they just die outright. Or get knocked unconscious, whatever. It just needs something stronger than a slightly better sleep spell. But with that concludes our look over of the Pugilist class and all of its subclasses, all of its strengths, weaknesses, faults, and suggestions of how they could possibly remake the class to be a little bit more suited with the spellcasters in 5e. Join me next time, in which I will find something else to cover and give my opinions on that and see how well we can fix that. Maybe I'll go over some r/Unmet Arcana homebrew. I have some suggestions in Discord, in the Pack Tactics Discord, that I can look over. In the next episode, I'm going to be going through the homebrew math for the Pugilist versus the Monk class to show you guys how inferior this class is to the Monk in terms of damage, sustainability, just in general, not operable to them, not comparable to the Monk class in any capacity. If you liked the video, please leave a like. If you want to leave a comment, tell me how I can improve on the series, feel free to do so. Subscribe for more homebrew review content, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Laters.